Hey there, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. My name is Daniel Trinham, and I will be your host as always. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to let you know of a few things of note. First, you may or may not be aware that I host another podcast called The Third Seat. The Third Seat is unrelated to the podcast you are listening to right now, but if you'd like to check it out, then I will put a link in the description of today's episode that you can use to listen to it. If you like this podcast, then I really think you will like The Third Seat as well, so I highly recommend you check it out. Next, I want to let you know of a few ways you can support the podcast. First, be sure to tell a friend if you enjoy the show. Word of mouth is not only a great way to help support the show, but it's also zero cost. Secondly, if you enjoyed today's episode, then be sure to leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Leaving a positive review is one of the best ways of not only supporting the show, but it also gives me direct feedback from you regarding how you feel about the show overall. I greatly appreciate if you decide to take the time to support the show in any of these ways. Finally, if you'd like to follow me or the show on social media, then feel free to check out the description of today's episode. Here you will find all affiliated and mentioned links, as well as how you can support the show online. As always, I want to thank you for tuning into and supporting the show. It really means a lot to me, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed making it for you. All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. My name is Daniel Trinham, and I will be your host today, as always. I'm excited to bring you this episode today. This episode, I've been requested to bring this episode to the public by one specific individual. I will leave this individual nameless for right now, but they know who they are. But this has been an episode that has been requested personally to me for a while now, and I'm excited to officially bring it to you all. So yeah, my guest today is Tyler Forrest. He is the new president at the University of Tennessee Wesleyan. But prior to that, he worked at my alma mater. I can now say that my alma mater, the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and I am really excited to speak with him today. So Tyler, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm super excited to be here today. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it is great. So I know I just mentioned a little bit about what you're currently doing and what you did before, but just for those that aren't aware of you and what you do and how you got to where you are today, would you care to just share a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you got here, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I started in higher education administration in 2010, really out of not having a clear direction of what was next. As you'll recall, that was during the Great Recession, and there were not many jobs out there. And I had applied to approximately 100 different places, and I thought I would never get a job, honestly. Maybe one is never to come. But it did. I had 3 offers out of those 100. One was to work at UTC as a financial analyst, and 2 others were in banking. And banking just didn't feel right to me at the time. So I ended up taking the UTC job. I had worked there on campus for 3 years prior to that as a part-time employee in the auxiliary services department, reconciling ledgers. So I really did kind of start at the very basic financial level when I started there, doing ledgers and counting cash. And after that, took the job as financial analyst, ended up staying 12 wonderful years there at UTC until recently, where I was able to go from the analyst to the more of the budget side and work my way into running the budget operations, then into more of a financial and operational role as a deputy chief financial officer for several years there, and then as the chief business officer for about 1.5 years there before I took this job as president of Tennessee Wesleyan here in my hometown of Athens. So it was exciting. It's been an exciting run. I will tell you, I've had many twists and turns, none of which I really expected to take. I always thought I would be an attorney initially. So needless to say, I've never sat in even a law class for maybe a business law or something like that. So I've not gotten near that. And that one time I thought I would be maybe a career state employee or go into serving in the legislative branch of some government or something like that. Well, that has never panned out. So here I am today. I'm excited to be where I am, but it is very interesting how you can take all these twists and turns, none of which you expect you ever expected. So I've kind of always been one that's a real planner, but I've learned to just accept which direction God's kind of taking you in at the same time, because I certainly feel like He has had His hands in all of these moves.
Yeah, no, I would, especially with that last part you just said, I wouldn't say I'm like a chronic planner or anything, but I definitely like I said, we were talking about right before we started recording. I just got back from vacation, and like I don't have everything planned out to a T, but whenever there is a plan, I want it to go to that plan.
Yes.
The analogy I always give is like if someone says, "Hey, we're gonna go get dinner tonight," and they say, "Okay, what's up?" Like I'm not a picky person when it comes to food, but if they say, "Hey, we're gonna go get tacos tonight," it's like, all right. In my mind, I'm ready for tacos. That's what we're getting.
Right.
That's what we're doing. And if an hour before rolls up and they say, "Hey, we've had a change of plans. We're going to go get chicken instead." Well, it's just like everything's been blown up. It's not that I dislike chicken. It's just like I was mentally prepared for tacos. Like that's what I wanted, And so I know exactly what you mean. Like I love the kind of the kind of unique freedom that plan gives you. As weird as that sounds, like having everything somewhat mapped out gives you a little bit of freedom and comfort. But I'm right there with you in that it's been a process for me to kind of become a little bit more willing to just adapt to the moment, to the situation. Just being willing to go with whatever happens and not being too rigid. I mean that's 100% part of who my story and my life. And I think it's probably definitely going to be an ongoing, process for me to continue adapting to that way of life and being able to kind of go with the flow a little bit more, if you want to say that,
Well, you have to at times, and you're a financial manager, just like I have been the majority of my career. And, financial managers are planners, so we fit the mold well. And I've told my teams for years, whether it's in my current job or previous, that I needed a plan. Even just today, I told a group of 3 individuals I met with, I said, it would really help me if we had a plan around what you're telling me, and don't give it to me in a 60-page document. Give me a 1 page of bullet points that I can comprehend. I said, my financial manager mind thinks in bullet points.
Yeah.
So that they got a good laugh out of that, as did I. But I know once I get that, I can digest it really good, and then we can make a plan from it. So right, wrong, or indifferent, planners will prevail, hopefully, in the end.
Oh yeah, no. When it comes to a 60-page document or a 1 to 2 page bullet point, I'm right there with you, 100%. Right. It's funny you mentioned earlier a business law class. I also took, I guess it was a mandatory class for my major, and I also had to take a business law class. And not that the class was fine. I did good in that class, but that was one of my least favorite classes, simply because anything regarding learning about like the law, or if you want to become a lawyer, anything at all loosely related to that, it's just information on top of information on top of pages on top of pages of stuff you got to read and go through. And I remember when I first started taking that class, I was just like, oh no, I don't want I'm not here for this. This is not what I want to do, but I'll do it if I have to. But that was not what I was about. It was definitely going against the grain for me, I guess, if you want to put it that way,
Oh, it absolutely. I'll tell you a really quick story, but when you said that about the 60-page document, again, it reminded me, I told you I wanted to go to law school, and was really pretty convinced that that's what I was doing until I was early in my junior year as an undergraduate student. I went to a meeting in Nashville. I had the opportunity to serve as the student representative on the UT Board of Trustees for 2 years. And we had a meeting over there that was at a law firm there in Nashville, a very big, prominent law firm. It was on the conference room there. And I'd asked the receptionist, I said, can you point me in the direction of the restroom? And she said, sure. She said, if you'll open this door and go down the long hallway, it'll be on your left. So I opened the door, went down, and it was a really long hallway, went down the long hallway at this law office, and I was looking on both sides, and all I saw was attorney after attorney after attorney with piles of paper on their desk. And I mean, literally piles. Some
Just
had
mountains.
piles beside the wall and lining the wall. And that was really the moment that I said to myself, Tyler, maybe law is not for you. And so that was kind of that one question of asking where the restroom is.
Yeah.
I'm 100% honest when I tell that story. That was really kind of the defining moment. I walked out of there and I thought, I just don't know that I could do this. So,
Yeah.
Again, interesting how those little things will change your life in a big way.
Yeah, no, I had a somewhat similar experience. Not that I wanted to be a lawyer necessarily, but when I first started at UTC, and to this day, I don't know what compelled me to want to do this, but I thought I wanted to try my hand at engineering, and more specifically computer engineering, which from what I have gathered, engineering as a whole is not an easy field, but computer engineering is like the hardest of the hard one. Like if you're gonna if you want to try to make it out with your sanity, then computer engineering is not the route for you. But nevertheless, that's what I chose. And I learned really quickly in that it was like within 2 weeks of being there, I was like, this just is not sitting right with me. Like, this is not what I don't know what's going on. I don't fit in with my class, but like, it just wasn't for me. It was nothing against the people. It was just like, it was like trying to fit a square peg in a circular hole. It just was not going to fit. And there came a moment where I think it was around midterms, and I was having trouble with some concept, and it was in like the basic like level 1 class for engineering, like physics level 1, like the most basic things. Like we're talking, you're learning about gravity. Like that's like the basics we're talking about here. Right. And I remember it was like a week until midterms or something like that. And my professor said, hey, we've got office hours coming up. If you want to come in and ask any questions, I'll be here from these hours and feel free to stop by. And I was like, all right, this is my chance. I can get some answers. I'll sit down with this guy, talk to him one-on-one and see if I can figure some stuff out. And so I walked into his office and we sat there for a minute, and he's just got these, like every single book known to man about like energy or just physics in general, or every single kind of law of physics, like every book written on these things was in his office. So I was a little intimidated when I walked in. And again, I'm also a new freshman, so I've never done this before. And I sit down, I was like, hey, Mr. So-and-so, I don't remember his name at this point. I was like, would you care to walk me through this problem on the homework here? And he sat there and he looked at it. He looked up at me and he was like, now you do know this is what we covered in the first week of class, right? And I said, yes, sir. I'm aware of that. I'm not entirely confident in my ability to do this. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly. And he said, okay, if this is what you need help with, then I'm happy to help. And I sat there and I told myself, I said, I got to figure something else out. This is not working for me.
For me.
Yeah. And so I was like, I knew my mom was an accountant. And I was like, I'll go give business a try after that. Let me just see it seems very different and very far away from engineering. And on UTC's campus, it was physically far away too. So I was like, right. Yeah. So it worked out for me in the end, but yeah, I had a similar experience like you did. But I want to talk here in a little bit. I want to talk about a little bit about your experience at UTC and how you're feeling now about your new position at Tennessee Wesleyan. But before we get there, I have a question about a story that I've been told about you, and I want to see if it's true. And it's a good story, I promise. But leading up to this, I was told that you, I think at a relatively young age, I want to say maybe 7th or 8th grade, I've heard this story about you and some like elderly man that you became a friend, you befriended, and apparently like inherited a house from him or something. Is this correct if what I've been told, or is this totally off the rails?
No, that is correct.
Okay.
That's pretty correct. I was in the 8th grade.
Yes.
And my cousin, Harry Byrne Jr., whose father had cast the deciding vote for women's suffrage in 1920, let me back up just a little bit. That's who you're referring to.
Yes.
It was assigned a family history project at the Athens Junior High School, and I reached out to him and I said, "Could you help me with this project?" Very innocently, not much to it, and he called me back, and we ended up having a good relationship. I came to visit him. He helped me with the project, and we just stayed in close contact thereafter. And he was really a terrific person, a great mentor for me. Another one of those unexpected things that happened to you. And he unfortunately did pass away in 2016. And I was very surprised to learn that he had passed a home that had been in our family since 1942 along to me, which ultimately is what got Emily and I back to Athens when we moved here in 2017. That was kind of the driver for that. We were super blessed for that to happen to us. And I've had people say to me, and I haven't kept it quiet because everybody knows it anyway, they'll say, you inherited a house. Yes, I did. You are absolutely correct. But it was also a house that really had not been upgraded in about 7 years. So you have to keep some context around that in that. So we did a pretty significant renovation to the house, and we love it. It sits in a great neighborhood on a few acres of land right in the city of Athens, and it's good for the kids to have a big yard to play in and all of that. So we've definitely been blessed in that regard, no doubt about it. But I will say, having a house that is now 80 years old this year is a lot of work for everybody. Yeah, so it's 80. It was the last house completed in Athens prior to World War II. Well, the war had already started, but building materials had not totally dried up until this time, but it was completed at that time. So it's a neat house, a lot of history. We really love living here, but it is a labor of love at the same time. There is always a project going on. I have a project list on my phone to check off and things that need to be done. But thanks to Cousin Harry, that was the reason that we kind of got one of the reasons we got back to Athens. That was definitely a driver behind it. And it was a super generous thing of him to do. He had actually inherited the house as well from his aunt in 1968. So there had been kind of a trend of that, but I candidly would have never, ever expected that at the same time. So listen, life has more twists and turns than I could keep up with at this point.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what I was thinking when you said that, because, even today, I mean, the things that we do today, there's a chance that it could have some impact way down the road that we're just simply not aware of. And I was told, like that story before. I think I was talking to my mom, and I was like, "Hey, I'm going to be doing this interview with Tyler," and so on. She was like, "You need to ask him about this story," and I was like, "Okay, that sounds interesting." But but on the surface, you think about it. Whenever, I mean, you were an 8th grader at the time, and you were working on like a history project. There's no way you could have known that it would have led to what it led to. I mean, that many years in the future. And I mean, like you said, I think that's a testament, one, just how many twists and turns and how unexpected life can be at times. But I guess the thing I want to ask you is so you said this house was 80 years old, and in my mind, when I'm thinking of, obviously architecture and design in that realm, like it changes over time. Things come in and out of style. You think of all the different, decorative styles that are used in housing and architecture in the past, and there'll be some in the future. And what comes to my mind is like, and this could be wrong, but like when I think of old houses, I think of like, big red, like shaggy carpets and like popcorn ceilings and like, just like these just weird curtains and stuff. Like, is that what this was like, or was it something different? Because that's just the image I have in my head of this house.
That's a good question. That it did have some red carpet. It wasn't shag, but it did have some red. But primarily the carpet in it was a 75-year-old 100% wool grade carpet, which interestingly enough, I've told this to many people, so I don't care to share it with you, but when the contractor took it out here and took it to the McMinn County landfill, I guarantee you it'll never disintegrate out there, because it was the real deal in the carpet world. And the house did still have 75-year-old curtains hanging that had been here. That were terrific curtains in the day, and surprisingly still in great shape. They were just, I'm sure they were quite pricey when they were bought and just held on. But it is kind of a timeless house. It was the architect that designed it was Charles Barber out of Knoxville, who also designed a number of buildings on the UT Knoxville campus. He was the architect for a portion of the First Baptist Church in Athens. And also he designed at least 2, if not 3 other houses in this neighborhood that we live in. So it definitely has a real timeless, design that I think from aesthetically from the road has stood the test of time. But you are correct. When you identified some things on the inside, it had some unusual, the bathrooms were that lovely pink tile.
Oh, nice.
Very common, or a green tile, I
think,
one of the bathrooms. So it was interesting. And I'll tell you something we didn't know about it, and the contractor quickly discovered when they went to tear out the kitchen. Every exterior wall is 100% poured in place concrete. So,
oh, wow.
That made some challenges on the renovation side as well. And I will tell you, it's really challenging if you go to hang a picture, because you got to have the right tools to do it, because there is no getting into that wall.
Well,
we quickly discovered that.
Yeah, it sounds like you might have a better chance like chiseling something into the wall than you would hanging a picture into it.
That is quite possible.
Yeah, if you're trying to drive a nail into it, I don't know what you would even do.
You don't drive a nail. I'll tell you that, because it won't go anywhere.
So what you're telling me is, if I were to walk into that house right now, what I would probably see on the walls is like, I'm thinking like cave paintings or like cave chiseled art, like little people like on the walls. That's probably what I would see.
At one time, perhaps, but we did get somebody in to help us hang. My dad is very good with the drill, so he came and helped us with that. That's funny.
But yeah, I wanted to hear the story about that, because I knew a few details, and I was like, I'm just intrigued by that. I want to hear some more details of it, and I'm glad to hear that. I'm sure, for one, it was you can definitely say it was a labor of love, because you hear one thing, it's like, oh, he got this house, but yeah, it was 70, 80 years old. There's going to be some renovations that have to be done to it, and I mean, any house, no matter what the age, there's going to be maintenance that has to be done to it, but especially one that's 7 to 8 decades old. I mean, that's going to require a good amount of work to it. So that's very interesting. But yeah, that's I'm just thinking about y'all sitting there like chiseling on the walls or something.
There were some of those moments, no doubt. Yes.
So cool. So I want to ask you a little bit. So I recently, I don't know when I can stop saying I recently graduated, but I feel like since I'm within a year, I guess I could still technically say that.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I think I can get away with it still. But I graduated from UTC back in December of 2021. And I think I had first heard your name like right before I started at UTC. And I think it may have been, who was it? I think it may have been Angie. She said something like, hey, if you need somewhere to stay, just call up Tyler Forrest and you can crash at his house. And I was like, okay, I don't know who he is, but I guess if I really need a couch to sleep on, I'll find him wherever he's at. And I kind of heard your name through the grapevine a few times here and there. But recently your name has popped up because of the new position that you've taken at Tennessee Wesleyan, back in both of our hometowns. I guess I'm technically from Inglewood, but Inglewood, Athens, it's the same thing at the end of the day.
Same thing.
Yeah. Same thing. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit just about how your feelings are on your time that you had at UTC, just some reflections that you have during that time, and then what you're hoping the future looks like for you at Tennessee Wesleyan, what your current feelings are on the job, and just how you're feeling about this new chapter and transition in your life.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I will tell you, when I first came to UTC as an undergraduate student about 16 years ago, I really, it didn't connect with it at all. I didn't like it. I didn't understand it. I had obviously grown up in a small town. It was a bigger city, albeit not Atlanta or anything like that. It was still much bigger than what I was used to. And I just couldn't get excited about it the whole first semester. So by the end of that first semester, I had to figure out a way to expedite my schedule and graduate in 3 years, because I just wanted to get out of there so bad. And then I met a few people that said, oh, you should get involved in this or that. And so I thought, well, I'll give it a try. If I'm going to be stuck at this place I don't like for 3 years, I might as well get involved in something. So I did, and ended up getting involved in student government and several other things on campus, which really got me connected to the university in a way that I would have never been able to connect with just sitting in the residence hall and going to class. I don't know why. I'd always known a lot of people in school, all throughout school. I'd gone to school with so many of the same people from kindergarten on. So again, it was just such a different experience all around. So after I, got involved, I really ended up liking it. I'd already told you the story of how I got the job there. But my time at UTC, all 12 years as a regular employee, 16 years total, was truly wonderful. I enjoyed my time there, and we were able to do a lot of great things to the campus, particularly in increasing the financial health of the campus and adding to the capital budget in a very significant way, and making a lot of noticeable improvements on the campus through the years that if you would look back at the campus 10 or 15 years ago, you wouldn't have seen any of that. And much of that was a team effort. I don't take personal credit for hardly any of it, because I'm a big promoter of teams. And I think all of those folks kind of get things done when you work collectively much better than independently. So when this job at Tennessee Wesleyan came open last November, when Dr. Harley Knowles announced that he would be retiring, a friend of mine here in Athens sent me a text while I was at a conference in South Carolina, and he said, Tyler, Harley's retiring. You need to think about it. And I candidly didn't really think about it that much. I enjoyed the rest of the conference, and it was a Southern Association of College and University Business Officers. It was right in my wheelhouse. I've been to these conferences for years, knew a lot of people there. So finished up the conference and came home. And by the end of the following week, which about a week and a half since he had announced his retirement, over 25 people had asked me about the job and if I was going to apply. And at that point, I thought, maybe I really should give this some serious consideration, because that was a lot of people to ask me if I'm going to apply for a job. So I dug into it, talked to a few people, gave it a lot of serious thought and prayer, and really reflected on it, and finally decided that I was going to apply. And I let a few people know at UTC, not many. My boss, Dr. Engel there, I kept him in the loop throughout the process, and he was very supportive as well. And I also, the entire time throughout the search process, talked to people intentionally thinking that somebody was going to tell me, Tyler, this is a terrible idea. Well, not one person throughout that entire process told me it was a terrible idea. I just knew somebody was. And I would even ask people that I was convinced would tell me that. I thought, oh, they're a staunch UTC supporter. They're going to say, you're insane. Why on earth would you do this? But nobody did. So all the more reason it kind of felt, natural to get in the process. There were 65 candidates. I, yet again, thought there's no way I would get to this pool. But, working through the process, I became even more energized. Honestly, the more I went through it, that's the value of a search, albeit they're difficult and long. They do give you a lot of time to reflect. The more people I would talk to and the more groups I would be interviewed by, the more interested I became. And it just ended up being a great fit. And in the end, the TWU board did end up offering me the job, and I was extremely excited about it. I also happened to be at the same conference. I was out of town, ironically, where I'd initially learned about it was the fall conference. The spring conference of that same organization is where I learned I had got the job. So how ironic is that?
Wow.
Small world, all tied around that conference. But when I was told I got the job, I was told I couldn't tell a soul. Well, that's not easy in Athens, Tennessee.
Yeah. Yeah.
So over the course of that week and a half where TWU was completing their due diligence and background checks and all of that, I had numerous people coming up to me and saying congratulations. And I had to say, well, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I have no earthly idea. It may go in that direction, it may not. So that it all kind of eventually worked out. I got the job, and it really was a big win for me professionally to do that, and something I'm excited about because I love serving organizations. I don't like things to be about me. So the ability to lead an organization as good as TWU really is an exciting adventure. Tying that back to UTC, probably one of the more difficult conversations I've ever had is going to tell Dr. Engel that I'm leaving. Even though I think he suspected it. And then even more difficult was telling my team, who many of which I had worked with for 12 years. A lot of the extended team I had either hired or promoted over those 12 years and worked with so closely. I was very comfortable working with them. You build friendships with people in a professional way over that period of time as well, and that was difficult, very difficult actually doing that. When you love the people you work with, that's not easy. But there is a season for everything, as I've told folks. Ecclesiastes speaks quite well to that. Chapter 3, which I've read 4 times that I can count in my life. That's always my go-to verse about there being a season for everything, and sure enough, that's what this was, and they understood that and were very supportive. But the time there, and I probably talked too long, Daniel, on that, but it really was very rewarding and something I enjoyed doing and getting engaged in so many different ways on that campus. But I'm the type of person, once you close a door, you kind of close it, and it's time to close that one and open another one. I'll still maintain many great friendships there and stay in touch, but I'm all bulldog proud now.
Nice.
Yeah.
And something that during my time at UTC that from my perspective really stood out to me, and I know that you worked you weren't like a professor or you weren't, not to my understanding.
No,
correct?
I was not.
Okay. I didn't think so. But something that stood out to me, and again, like I was a business major, so I was briefly an engineering major, but that's a stretch to even say that much. But I was an a business major, and I didn't interact with a lot of the other colleges and areas within the university. But something that seemed to be the case for me, and you can confirm or deny this if it is or if it isn't, but something that seemed to be the case to me is that everybody from the faculty standpoint, or most people that I interacted from the faculty, whether it be professors or whether it be people that were working in the administrative side of things, or maybe they were, kind of on the executive level, or maybe they were, people working in the food court. I mean, whatever level you worked in within the university, it seemed like to me the people working there were like they really had a sense of camaraderie to a degree. There was a real tight knitness to it. I don't know if that's a word, knitness, but I'm going to use it. But they were. It seemed like it wasn't just people showing up to work every day, but a lot of them really they had 2 main goals. It was to show up and teach and to care for the students, not just as students, but care for them as individuals and as people. And that's something I've talked a little bit about with some of the different, faculty members that I've interacted with over the past few semesters. But I wanted to ask you just if that seemed to be the case with you, and if that's the case, if how you hope to kind of instill that while you're, during your time at Tennessee Wesleyan, what your hope is, if you can kind of instill that, or it may already be there, but if you can instill that kind of team aspect, like you were saying, and kind of infuse that sense of camaraderie within the actual faculty itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just start out by saying that's the easy answer to that. At UTC, they had a long-standing motto, unofficial motto, I should say, of students first. Mm-hmm. And we pushed that out repeatedly to numerous people on the campus. When I left there I had a couple hundred people on my team and almost a couple hundred more that were on contract. And some of those were custodians, groundskeepers, food service workers, all the way up to senior finance and HR officials and senior operators throughout the campus. And they all got behind students first. It's something that if you're on a college campus, you have to understand that, because students are the reason you're there. And I actually have no reason in the world to believe that's not the focus at Tennessee Wesleyan either. I think they're very student driven. They've been focused on student success. They've tried to look at it from metrics, not just a metric standpoint, but also just what's right. And when you want to be students first, that's how you have to think, is what's right for the student. I've gone out of my way throughout the years, and not in a bragging way by any means, but to try to help students, to try to listen to students. If students have had issues with their accounts, or parents have been frustrated with a bill or a parking ticket or this, that, and the other, and the list could go on and on. I've personally worked through many of those because I felt like it was the right thing to do. And I'll continue to do that in my new role at TWU. It's what I enjoy doing. I feel like we're there to serve students and make their experience very good. And without a doubt, I've heard that from current students at TWU, and often heard that from students at UTC. I met with a student last week at Tennessee Wesleyan, and I asked them, what was your biggest concern about the campus? And the person quickly responded, parking, which is often the top student complaint. I've rarely been on a campus where it's not the top student complaint.
Yes.
And I didn't promise this student that I would fix it, because that is a very difficult problem to fix. But I told her we would work on it, and we will work on it. We worked on it at UTC extensively, made some major changes. But students, like when we made many of those changes that made it a lot better, was largely prior to your time there. So you wouldn't have known the changes that were made of how it got better. So then 4 years later, every student thinks it's bad again. It's very common. It's cyclical. I've seen it happen multiple times. But in some ways, it's good because it constantly keeps administrators on their toes. They need to be improving things. And that's how I've always looked at it. I think it's a student's right to question what's going on a campus, and would encourage them to do so. That's why, as an administrator, I've always had an open door, and would encourage others to as well, because I think you learn a whole lot just listening to folks and how you can improve your campus. So students first, whether at UTC or any other TWU or any other institution, is certainly one that I would continue to push for.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up the whole parking thing, because I think it's kind of a little bit of a joke now. There's not like in a bad sense, but it's kind of like a running joke at UTC. It's like, oh, well, what can we do to improve if you ask any student, like, what could be changed? Like, well, if I could just find somewhere to park, that'd be a big,
right.
But it's a little silly at this point. I mean, there's lots of parking on campus, and there are bigger issues in the world than, where to find parking. But it does bring me to something I want to ask you about, is that I think oftentimes, and this, I'm speaking just for me, but I would imagine others may agree with this sentiment. It can seem like, obviously lots of the students, all they see is the professors, and usually they'll see a couple of administrative people kind of behind the scenes every now and then. Maybe it's, some individuals that help them get their schedules right, or maybe it's like some kind of counselor or anything. But, most of the time, my experience was interacting with professors and then a few other people kind of behind the scenes. But obviously, there's a lot of individuals, aside from those people, that worked at universities and at schools all across the country. And so for me, I knew as a student that there was a lot going on behind the scenes that I probably didn't see, but I never knew what that was, or like what was going on back there. And so you don't have to tell me every single, thing you ever did, but as someone who has and currently is working in a role like that, that's not always, a professor every single day is usually, or most days, is right in front of the students all the time talking to them, to whereas your role may not be like that all the time. What do the students not see that it may be good for them to know about. Or maybe, like you said, at UTC, the motto was students first. And what do the students not see that you would hope that they would be able, that you wish they could see? You wish they could see the hours that are spent trying to fix these seemingly important or maybe seemingly small issues like parking. Like, what do they not see that goes on kind of behind the scenes as an educator in your position?
Well, universities, regardless of their size, are often small cities. Some are bigger cities than others. You can go to some of these large SEC schools that are bigger than towns we grew up in.
Oh yeah, yeah.
In many regards, so there are a lot of complex things that go on behind the scenes that students candidly should never have to see. There are numerous hot water lines and cold water lines and things like that you don't ever think about when you go to turn on the faucet, that have all kinds of issues associated with them: heating and cooling and electrical, preparing budgets and hiring people. There's a lot that goes in, particularly at an institution like UTC, related to campus safety. It's in an urban area. UTC has their own police department. It has their own environmental safety team and things like that are things that a student wouldn't even know who these people are behind the scenes, but definitely keep the campus operating every single day and do it in a really good way. And I certainly was proud of that team. And there's folks at Tennessee Wesleyan that do the exact same thing. It's just those things that we try to do in a very quiet way to be sure that the student experience is really good. And if they are loud and people know about them, we've done a bad job at letting folks know what's going on. I think when one of the more interesting incidents that I think I'm remembering it correctly, we've had several residence hall issues through the years, but I was at a meeting in Nashville. This has been 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, probably 3 years ago now that I think about it. And I got my phone rang at 2 or 3 in the morning, which that happened actually somewhat regularly, actually. UTC police calling, and it said there'll be an emergency call in 5 minutes. And I thought, what on earth could this be at 3 in the morning?
Yeah.
Well, all of the water to majority of campus was off. City of Chattanooga, Tennessee American had a significant water failure.
I remember this. I remember this now. Yeah.
Significant water failure. And that means that we had a significant water failure. Yes. I want to say roughly 3/4 of the campus was down. It was substantial. Well, that might be okay for students that don't live on campus, because we could just cancel classes for the day. But we also, at that point, had roughly 4,000 students living on campus that needed a bathroom and a place to wash their hands and a place to eat, and the list goes on and on and on. So by 4 in the morning, my team and I are on the phone locating porta potties all over the city to try to figure out how to get these on campus. We were figuring out how to feed people and where we could get them to give them recreation, where we're going to have to contract with the hotel. All of this happening before 6 in the morning. So it's those type of things that the whole team comes together and just figures out. COVID was like that. The whole team. That affected every administrator, every faculty member, every staff member on campus. But the whole team had to come together and just figure it out, flip all those courses online and figure out how to keep the campus safe. And do you wear a mask? Do you not wear a mask? I mean, it is just a really interesting time, or that was a really interesting time, definitely behind the scenes, to watch all that unfold and to be a part of it. So there is a lot, and I cannot underestimate that goes on. But like I said, if you know about it, we did a bad job, and I'll stand by that.
That's funny. So I'm glad you brought up the incident with the water, because I had forgotten about that. But I know exactly what you're talking about, because I was on campus when that happened, and I have a funny story with this. So during that time, I forget whether it was spring or fall semester, but I was living at the Walker
Yeah,
dorms over kind of on the south side. I think it's south side of campus.
that's right.
I was living over there, and I was living with three other guys, and one of the guys I was living with, he was on my side of the dorm. We had gone to high school together. Like I'd known him for a while. And I remember we, just like everybody else, we woke up that day and we were told that like the city of Chattanooga had no water or something like that. We're like, okay, well, what are we supposed to do? And so our first instinct was we were going to go see if the water worked. And in our dorm, it did work. So we're like, okay, let's just bottle up as much of this as we can and hold on to it because we don't know what's going to happen. So we were filling up bottles and just like buckets and stuff. We didn't know what was going on. We're like, okay, let's just fill this up and we'll hold on to it if need be. But so, some time went by and I started hearing like getting texts from people and they'd say, yeah, the water, like my shower's not working or it's really cold or something like that. Like a lot of stuff just wasn't working correctly. But for whatever reason, in our dorm, our specific dorm, we like never really encountered any of those problems. Our hot water still ran, our sink still ran, everything, if we had never heard about it, we wouldn't have known that anything was going on. And so we were, somewhat tongue in cheek, but we were just kind of having some fun with it. And so I don't even remember why we decided to do this, but prior to this, me and my roommate had gone to Walmart and we got one of these cheap little yard sale signs. It was probably not even, maybe about as big as a laptop screen. I'm looking at it right now. And what we wanted to do is we taped it to the front of our door, our outside door, and we pretended like we'd write things on it. Like we were communicating with everybody outside of us that we pretend like it was a yard sale sign, And so whenever all the water went out, we were like, okay, well, we're going to have some fun with this. And so we got the sign and we wrote something like $5 for cold showers and $10 for hot showers. If you want them here, you can come by our dorm and we'll sell them to you. And we like took a picture of it and, put it on like social media or something. We were like, hey, come by if you want it. We weren't being serious. I wasn't about to let some strange person just walk into my apartment and take a shower, but it was just kind of funny nonetheless. And it was just funny at the time because we didn't know what to do. And it was just so strange. And eventually it got resolved. I don't remember how long it was until it actually got resolved, but yeah, at the time, that was a funny memory of mine, having that yard sale sign on the front of my door and kind of pretend to sell it in showers to people.
Absolutely. You were being a real entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, I was like, we've got hot water. And so let's share the love with everybody. Let's give it out a little bit and see what happens. That was funny, but
absolutely.
But yeah, I know, like I've always known that there are things going on in the background, obviously, that that I don't see. And like you said, it's probably best that I don't, because if I knew about every single decision on a budget or every single decision on a hire of an individual or every single minute decision about everything, that's, like you said, that probably is a good indication that the people that are making those decisions may not be handling their job correctly. Like part of that job is to make sure that the student doesn't worry about those things. They don't have to carry that burden at all. And I think that's a good way to put it, is understanding that, you mentioned how, at the start of this conversation, how you had worked on a lot of different things that, 10, 15 years ago, the campus as it is right now wouldn't even be recognizable. It would be totally different than what it used to be. And those small changes that over time they compound. And I think that really those small changes are a testament to the work that individuals like you do, because, like I said, most of the students, they see the professors, they see some of the administrative officials kind of right in the front that they interact with, right in the buildings at the for whatever major they choose.
Yeah.
But they don't always see the work going on in the background like what you do. And so I think it's important to highlight that, because it's an important component, obviously, to what's going on, but it kind of is like the foundation, the infrastructure, if you want to say, of all the work that goes on at the university,
There always is an infrastructure, and you pegged it. That's what all of that is, in one way, literally or figuratively.
Yeah. And I think about my time at UTC, and I just, it was a time that I really enjoyed, and I'm really thankful for it. And I know a lot of people that they don't have great experiences at their universities, and that's, everybody's experience is different. I'm sure there's plenty of people, like, like you said yourself, when you first got to UTC, you were looking for the quickest way out of there. But
I was.
It at least pleases me to know, and again, I didn't go to every single class for every single major, but it at least pleases me to know that the general theme for those that are working behind the scenes and that are trying to cater the experience for each student, it's modeled after and centered around the needs of the student. I think it's a great starting point, and I think it's a great way to model the future, because quite literally the students are what keep this whole thing going. Without the students, then there's nobody to teach, and there's no real institution. So I think it's great that that's the mindset that you all had during your time at UTC, and that you're hopefully going to carry forward into Tennessee Wesleyan. I think that's great, and I'm very happy for you as well that you're getting this opportunity. You mentioned earlier how it seemed like it was just kind of a shot in the dark to a degree. You were like, well, let me just apply and see what happens. But I think oftentimes those kind of stepping out, those kind of leaps of faith like that, even if you don't know what's going to come in the future, oftentimes those experiences can really reap the most rewards and really surprise you about what you're made of.
That's right. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. You have to be willing to go where you're supposed to go at times, and then you said it well, sort of take a leap of faith. And I've done that multiple times throughout my career. Sometimes it's gone in vastly different or wildly different directions than I thought it would, but it's always in the end been exactly where I needed to land. And I can equate that to so many different things in my life, but the career is definitely one of those things.
100%. I'm right there with you. So, but yeah, I before I move on to this next brief little segment I have for you, I'm excited to talk to you about it. First off, I just want to say I want to ask you just regarding your time at, let me back up a little bit. How long have you officially been the new president of Tennessee Wesleyan?
Since July 1. So I haven't had many days on the job.
Gotcha. That's what I thought. It was a fairly new. I mean, I know you've accepted the job since before then, but I didn't know when it was officially official. Right. Just in regards to that, what do you think is what is your, if you could set the theme for what you hope the next, who knows how long you'll be working there, but let's just say, the next 1, 2 to 3 years at the very least, what do you hope is the theme for your time there, and what you can hope to accomplish during as kind of like the key point to while you're there? What is the first, or not the first necessarily, but what is the central point you really want to hammer home as you're beginning to start this new endeavor for in your career?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, and I'll go ahead and clarify. I certainly hope to be there longer than 1, 2 years. I would like to have a good long run at Tennessee Wesleyan, and I certainly plan to work as hard as I can to try to make that. It would probably be a little premature to give you some grand vision, but I'll tell you.
Well, you have only been on the job for about a week, so I'll give you a little bit of grace.
So I'll tell you what I've told others, and also ask for the ability to write it in pencil and erase it, perhaps wrong thing. But what I shared with the campus on day one via email, we shared it with faculty, staff, and students, was that we would work together to form priorities, but 2 that were sort of non-negotiables for me, which are things that the campus in many ways are already doing and already doing well, but we'll continue to focus on. And that's ensuring student success, kind of with the theme that you and I talked about a minute ago, and then also continuing to build upon and grow the excellent academic programs that the campus already has. And I think if we can do both of those, in many ways, everything else kind of falls in place, because those are really the bedrock of the campus. TWU has a really, I'm not going to say unique place, but a prominent place in the fact that they have super strong NAIA athletic programs as well. So when you look at building upon student success and things of that nature, athletics plays a big role in that, as it should. And they've had multiple championship teams through the years. And I have great confidence that we'll continue to have those as well. I expect them to be better than last year. Now, I can't control that 1 ounce, but it doesn't mean I won't be their biggest cheerleader in doing so. And we're also in the process of finalizing the campus strategic plan. There was already a draft of one in place that Dr. Knowles had wanted the new person coming in to have the ability to tweak and finalize. So my goal is to have that finalized by November, and I don't see any reason that we couldn't at that point, pending the board approving it at that time. So a lot of things like that. The strategic plan will definitely be a big picture roadmap of how to accomplish some of those things. And I'm looking forward to, again, kind of digging in on that one, finalizing it, and getting it to be a living document, not one that's sitting on the shelf that we can really use frequently and reference back and measure ourselves against, because we've got a lot of work to do, definitely, if we want to keep moving the campus forward. But I'm very confident that the team in place can do that.
Yeah, and I love to hear that. Like I said, I guess that question's a little difficult because, like you said, you've only been on the job for about a week now, and that's it's like saying, it's like the question is like, what do you want your ultimate life goal to be? It's like, that's a big question,
That's right. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like I'm still trying to figure it out, but yeah, I love that, there, whatever, obviously, like you said, I like the analogy of give you a pencil and write it down, but you may need to erase it later. Things will change, priorities will change, and your immediate objectives will change. But I love that your foundation for it all is, one, making sure the students are taken care of, and then two, making sure that you uphold and improve upon the success and health of the actual academic institutions in and of themselves. So I love it, man. That is awesome. And I'm very, very happy for you that you're able to take on this new endeavor. Before we,
I want to have me back in a year or two, and I'll answer that question more thoroughly.
All right. Well, hey,
I'll even give you some outcomes at that point. But right now, I'm going to have to shortchange you just a little bit.
No, that's fine. I wanted to see what your response would be, because, like I said, I know that it's a little early on, and that's a big kind of question to ask. But the fact that you have a good starting point, I think that's very important. And I'd love to see how things go a year, 2, 3 down the road, and see what happens. But before we move on to this next segment, I want to just say, first off, thank you very much for doing this. I know that you said before we started that you got a little one in the other room, and I don't want to steal you away for too long. But I really appreciate you taking some time to talk to me today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I really hope that everybody who listens really enjoys. But the kind of closing segment that I like to do here on the show is always in a little bit of a different vein than whatever we talk about throughout the entirety of the show. And it is what I like to call 15 quick questions with whatever guest I'm speaking to at the time. Okay. All these questions are totally unrelated to everything we've been talking about. So they're going to be, different in that regard, but they're all this or that questions. And so, it'll be either A or B. And I just want to get your immediate thoughts on these, and just get your gut reaction to if you're feeling this or if you're feeling that. I want to see what your thoughts are, and we'll go through these 15 quick questions with you. So does that sound all right with you?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. Sounds great. Well, this is 15 quick questions with Tyler Forrest. Let's go. Socks with sandals, yes or no?
No.
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
No.
Summer, fall, winter, or spring?
Fall.
Who would win in a unicycle race, Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker?
Luke Skywalker.
Let's see. Hot coffee or iced coffee?
Neither.
Who would win in a dance competition, The Rock or Kevin Hart?
I have no earthly idea. I'm not sure, Daniel. I might do some research on that one before I answer that one.
How about this? We'll make those one of the follow-up questions. If
okay.
A year or so
fair
from now.
enough.
Yeah, we'll do that. Which decade do you prefer, the 70s, 80s, or 90s?
90s.
Guacamole or salsa?
Salsa.
Waffles or pancakes?
Waffles.
Michael Jackson or Prince?
Michael Jackson.
Blue cheese or ranch dressing?
Blue cheese.
That's where we depart right there. Are Crocs fashionable? Yes or no?
Not in my world.
Crunchy or creamy peanut butter?
Creamy.
If you had to choose, would you rather watch a movie marathon or a TV show marathon?
TV show marathon.
And the final 15th question, this is the same question I ask everybody at the end of this. And it's kind of a tradition to end on this question. And I want to make sure to get your rationale with this, but I want to see kind of what your thought process is with it.
Okay.
Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? You can take a minute to think about this with you, because I know you got to kind of get a mental image here and think about the pros and the cons of each one. But I want to see what your thought process is on this.
Okay, a horse-sized duck. What was the second part of that?
So either one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses.
I would say one horse-sized duck.
Okay.
Primarily because I like to tackle big problems. It seems big in many ways, even though the other one seems like many tiny problems. So I'll go with the one big problem, kind of eating an elephant one bite at a time, and get that way. Sorry, I had to stall. I had to get that visual in my head of ducks and horses.
No. Listen, you are not the first person to need to take a little bit to kind of process that question, but I love that question, one, just because it's kind of a little bit of a curveball, but it's funny just to hear everybody's line of thinking with each one, because I've gotten every which way with that question. Every single time I've heard it, some people are this one or that one, and the rationale with each one is always different. I always like to hear what their thought process is and how they think about that, because obviously I hope that nobody ever has to encounter a duck-sized horse, or for that matter, horse-sized ducks or anything. But it's always funny to hear the way of thinking and kind of the line of logic with that. So I like it, man. That's awesome. Well, cool. Before we finish up here, is there anything? I know that you, like I said, you just started. Do you have any websites or social media handles or anything that anybody can follow along with you on that you feel comfortable sharing or anything?
Well, we certainly got the TWU website, which pushes out a number of things some of the things that I've already put together are on the website. We encourage folks to check that out. And I will say, I may not be a big social media user, but the one thing I am always is an open door guy. So should anybody ever want to reach out, or if I can ever help anyone, I would encourage you to do so. And I will close, Daniel, by saying, super proud of you. I've followed you. I've always known who you were. And I think a lot of the work you did at UTC as a student and now as a starting out professional is to be commended. You have big things ahead, my friend.
Well, I appreciate that. That definitely means a lot. And I really appreciate that. That is always good to hear. As I would imagine, one for you, I don't, as weird as this may seem, I don't always like I have a hard time taking compliments at times. I don't always want the spotlight to be on me. And so it's nice every now and then. It's nice to be, told nice things about yourself. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. But yeah, I will make sure I'll put the link for the Tennessee Wesleyan website down in the description for today's episode. So if you're listening and you want to check it out, then feel free to head down there. You can follow along with Tennessee Wesleyan, maybe see some of the stuff that's going on there and follow along. But yeah, Tyler, again, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope that everyone that is listening enjoyed. So yeah, thank you again so much for speaking with me today, and maybe we'll do it again here in a year or two, and we'll keep updated with how things are going for you. How does that sound?
That sounds terrific, Daniel. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
All right, sounds great. Thank you all for listening. Bye. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the podcast. As one final reminder, if you'd like to support the show, then don't forget to rate and review the show wherever you get your podcast, or share it with a friend. If you'd like to check out any links that were mentioned during the show, or follow the show or myself on social media, then feel free to head to the description of today's episode to find these links. As always, thank you again for checking out today's episode, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I will catch you all on the next episode of the podcast. See ya!